Would you recognize a life-changing moment while it was happening? The fluorescent lights hummed softly in the near-empty diner, their glow casting long shadows against the checkered floor. It was the kind of place that felt suspended in time, where the smell of burnt coffee and old vinyl lingered like ghosts of conversations past. Behind the counter, Eli Carter wiped a stubborn stain for the 5th time that hour, though he knew it wasn't going anywhere. Neither was he. Bills cluttered his kitchen table back at his cramped apartment, eviction notices stacked like accusations. He had once arrived in New York, clutching a notebook full of dreams, believing he had stories to tell. Now he was just another face behind the counter, invisible to the world that rushed past the fog-up diner windows. A chime rang out as the front door swung open, breaking the silence. Eli barely looked up at first. Another customer, another order, another moment that wouldn't matter. But then he felt it. A presence. Not loud, not demanding, but undeniable. A woman stepped inside, pulling her coat tighter around her shoulders as if shielding herself from more than just the cold. She walked with a quiet confidence, choosing the corner booth near the window, where the neon glow of the streetlights flickered against the glass. She didn't fumble with her phone, didn't glance around impatiently. Instead, she simply was, rooted, as if she belonged there. Something about her gave Eli pause. He grabbed his notepad and walked over, the scratch of his pen against the paper the only sound between them. She looked up, eyes warm, assessing. And then she smiled. "I'll have a cup of coffee," she said. Black. Simple order. Simple moment. But something about the way she said it made his hands unsteady. What would you do if a stranger changed your life in an instant? The scent of fresh coffee curled into the air as Eli filled the mug, steam rising like whispered secrets between them. His hands were steady now, but his mind wasn't. There was something about this woman. The way she took up space without demanding it. The way she looked at him, really looked at him, as if she already knew his story. He set the cup down carefully, the porcelain clinking softly against the table. She wrapped her hands around the warmth, her fingers slow and deliberate, as if savoring the moment. "You look tired," she said, her voice smooth yet edged with quiet concern. Eli blinked, momentarily thrown. Customers rarely acknowledged him beyond their orders, let alone saw him. Yeah," he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. "Long shift." She nodded, taking the slow sip of coffee. "And longer nights, I'm guessing." His breath caught for a fraction of a second. There was no accusation in her tone, no pity, just observation. Accurate observation. How did she know? Eli offered a half smile, the kind people wear when they're not sure how much to reveal. Something like that. A pause settled between them, not awkward, but weighted. She stirred her coffee absently, even though she hadn't added anything to it. Then, without looking up, she said, "You right, don't you?" The words hit him like a rogue wave, knocking the air from his lungs. His grip tightened on the coffee pot handle. "How did you?" "You carry yourself like a storyteller," she said simply, "like someone who sees more than they say." Eli swallowed. For a second, he considered brushing it off, making a joke, pretending it didn't strike something deep within him. But instead, he exhaled a quiet laugh, shaking his head. "Yeah, well, doesn't pay the bills." The woman set her cup down, her gaze locking onto his. There was something steady about it, something unshakable. "Not yet," she said. 2 words. That was all. But they rooted themselves in him like seeds in soil, growing in the space between his self-doubt and long-forgotten ambition. He couldn't tell if it was the way she said it or the certainty in her tone, but for the first time in a long time, he felt a flicker of something other than exhaustion. Hope. Eli cleared his throat, reaching for the coffee pot again, just to have something to do with his hands. "Are you famous or something?" he asked, half joking, trying to shake the moment loose. She chuckled softly, a sound like ripples over still water. Something like that. Eli smiled despite himself, though confusion still gnawed at the edges of his thoughts. There was something surreal about all of this. About her. But before he could say anything else, she turned her attention back to her coffee, as if the conversation had already served its purpose. And somehow, deep down, Eli knew. This wasn't just another order. This wasn't just another customer. Audience engagement prompt. Have you ever had a stranger truly notice you when you felt invisible? Tell us in the comments. The coffee in her cup had gone cold, but she didn't seem to mind. She sat there, eyes thoughtful, fingers tracing slow, absent-minded circles against the rim of the porcelain. Eli felt the shift before it happened. Something intangible yet undeniable, like the air thickening before a storm. He reached for the check without thinking, sliding it onto the table beside her. That was his cue. The moment was ending. Just another stranger passing through. But then, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a pen. Eli watched as she clicked it open with a quiet certainty. Her movements were deliberate, unhurried, as if she were carving something permanent into the moment itself. She turned the receipt over and began to write. The diner, though never loud, seemed to fall into complete silence. The scratch of the pen against the paper was the only sound between them, a soft, rhythmic whisper. His pulse quickened. She finished writing and placed the receipt face down in front of him. Standing in one smooth motion, she adjusted the collar of her coat and gave him one final look, her eyes holding something he couldn't quite name. "Take care of yourself, Eli," she said. His throat tightened. There was something final in the way she said it, as though she knew she wouldn't see him again. As though she had already left something behind for him to hold on to. "Wait, how do you know my name?" The question tumbled from his lips before he could stop it. But the door chime rang out, and she was gone. Eli stood there, motionless, staring at the empty space where she had been just seconds ago. His fingers hovered over the receipt, hesitant, as if he already knew that whatever was written there would change something inside him. Slowly, almost reverently, he flipped it over. 7 words, just 7 handwritten words. "The world needs your voice. Don't stop." His breath caught. His vision blurred for a second as he read the words again and again. The ink seemed to pulse against the paper, alive with meaning. "The world needs your voice. Don't stop." A lump formed in his throat. It was ridiculous, really. This was just a few words scribbled on the back of a diner receipt. It wasn't money. It wasn't a promise. And yet, it felt bigger than that. He traced the words with his thumb, his heartbeat drumming against his ribs. Something about the message resonated deep within him, pulling at the part of him that still believed in things like fate, in moments that mattered. Then, his gaze dropped lower, to the signature beneath the message, and the breath in his lungs vanished. His knees nearly buckled. The receipt trembled in his grip as reality crashed over him. Oprah. Freaking. Winfrey. His mind raced, trying to piece together the surreal puzzle. Had she known who he was? Or was this just a coincidence? Why would she write something so specific? For a long moment, he just stood there, gripping the receipt like a lifeline, heart thundering in his chest. "The world needs your voice. Don't stop." Did she really mean it? Could it be true? He suddenly felt too seen, too raw, too real. Audience engagement prompt. Would the words mean more to you than the money? How would you react? Eli's fingers trembled as he held the receipt, staring at the ink like it was some kind of prophecy. "The world needs your voice. Don't stop." He read it again and again. The weight of those words pressed against his chest, heavier than any paycheck he'd ever received. His heart pounded. He needed to do something, say something. Before he even realized what he was doing, he pulled out his phone. The diner's fluorescent lights cast a dull glow over the crumpled receipt as he snapped a picture. His thumbs hovered over the keyboard. When Oprah Winfrey tells you not to stop, you listen. He hesitated for a fraction of a second before hitting post. At first, nothing happened. Just another tweet among millions. He set his phone down, heart still racing, and went back to work. The weight of the moment still clung to him, but life went on. For a while. Then, an hour later, his phone vibrated. Then again, and again. A notification. Then 10, then 100. His tweet was blowing up. By the time his shift ended, it had been retweeted thousands of times. News outlets had already picked it up. BuzzFeed, CNN, The New York Times, Entertainment Weekly, all running headlines about the struggling writer who received a message from Oprah. It didn't take long before reporters were calling the diner, customers whispering behind their menus. His manager, usually indifferent, patted his back, grinning like he had just discovered some hidden celebrity. "This is great for business, kid," the man chuckled, flipping through the morning newspaper. "You should be thanking me for hiring you." Eli barely heard him. He scrolled through the thousands of replies. The story had become a phenomenon overnight. Audience engagement prompt. Do viral moments help or hurt people? Let's talk about it. At first, the internet was overwhelmingly positive. "This is the sign I needed today. Thank you for sharing." If Oprah tells you to write, you do it. This just gave me chills. What a moment. People resonated with it. They saw themselves in Eli, the struggling dreamer, the person on the edge of giving up, the one who just needed to hear that they mattered. But then, as it always does, the internet turned. The first negative comments started rolling in. Why didn't she just give him money? Another billionaire giving words instead of real help. Oh please. This is just PR. She probably does this all the time. It's easy to say don't stop when you're a billionaire sitting in a fancy diner. Eli's stomach twisted. The moment had felt so pure, so real, and now it was being picked apart like a spectacle. His DMs flooded with requests. Journalists, publishers, TV show invites. People weren't just interested in the story. They wanted him. Eli hadn't felt this exposed in his entire life. His face was on news websites. Friends he hadn't spoken to in years were messaging him, suddenly remembering they existed in his world. Every word he had ever tweeted, every blog post he had ever written, was being analyzed and scrutinized. Someone dug up an old short story he had posted years ago and started circulating it. This is the kind of writing Oprah was talking about, they claimed. But others weren't so kind. His writing is mediocre at best. If Oprah really wanted to help, she'd have picked someone with real talent. Eli felt sick. His hand shook as he scrolled through the flood of notifications, unable to stop himself. How had everything spiraled like this? He had only wanted to share the moment. He hadn't meant for it to become a circus. Worst of all, Oprah had said nothing. No response, no follow-up, nothing. Was she ignoring it? Did she regret leaving the note? Did she even remember him? The thought sent a new kind of dread creeping through his veins. What would you do if a private moment became a public spectacle? The phone wouldn't stop ringing. Emails, texts, notifications, a never-ending flood of attention. Publishers wanted to talk. Agents wanted meetings. And news anchors wanted an exclusive interview. Eli Carter, the struggling writer who got an unexpected message from Oprah Winfrey, had become a headline. But he didn't feel like a success. He felt like a commodity. For days, he avoided calls, let emails pile up, and ignored reporters who waited outside the diner. The moment that had once filled him with hope now felt twisted, stolen, reshaped into something unrecognizable. His hands hovered over his laptop. He should be writing. But how could he? Was he even a writer anymore, or just a story people consumed? The envelope arrived without fanfare. No branding, no return address, just his name scrawled in a handwriting he instantly recognized. Eli's breath caught. His fingers fumbled as he tore it open, heart hammering as he unfolded the single sheet inside. Fame is noise. Truth is quiet. Which matters more? No signature. None was needed. Eli exhaled, sinking into the silence of the moment. Truth is quiet. He had let the world define what the note meant. Let strangers turn his story into a spectacle. But that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was the message itself. What mattered was what he did with it. Eli shut off his phone. The silence was immediate, deafening in the best way. He ignored the calls, the offers, the temptation to let others shape his path for him. Instead, he did the only thing that had ever felt real. He wrote. Not for clicks, not for attention, but because he had something to say. Weeks later, he published his first collection of short stories. No ghostwriters, no corporate deals, just his words, raw and unfiltered. It didn't go viral. It didn't make headlines. But one day, he walked into a bookstore and saw his name on the spine of a book. He ran his fingers over the cover, letting the weight of it settle into his bones. This was real. And for the first time in a long time, so was he. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the city, Eli sat at his desk, a blank page in front of him. He no longer feared the silence. It was his to fill. He reached into his wallet and pulled out the faded receipt, now worn at the edges. The ink had smudged slightly, but the words remained. The world needs your voice. Don't stop. Eli smiled, folded it carefully, and placed it beside him. Then, with steady hands, he began to write. Who can you lift up today? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories.